Hello, BookTube. Who's up for a little mail? You're always up for a little mail. And I certainly am up for your company while I do it. It's so much more enjoyable than not having your company. I remember when I used to open these packages every day without the thought of sharing the experience with anybody. It's so much fun to have bookish people doing this with me. So let's start off with this extremely small, lightweight thing. And once again, we face the choice, the lady or the tiger. Oh, it's either a slim volume of poetry, or it's a catalog full of wonders. Let's see what it is this time around. Oh, God. Okay. Apparently there's more than one species of tiger. Okay. Oh, God. Okay, this comes out in late October. This is the advance copy of Sleep of Memory by Patrick Modiano, who is one of the latest in a long line of literary third-string non-entities who were raised into the imperium of the heavens themselves by being awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature. Patrick Modiano is one of three names that come immediately to my mind when I think of three reasons why I'm happy that the Nobel Prize for Literature seems so hamstrung by crises that it may never be awarded again in our lifetime. And if this is the sort of thing that it does, making sure that every single last burp and tittle of someone like Patrick Modiano is published and republished and reprinted, and all of a sudden made to be something that the literati have to take seriously and write long think pieces about in the New York Review and in the New Yorker, then I'd rather the Nobel Prize not exist. Thanks very much. As it is, I had to listen when it first happened and publishers started bringing out his reams and reams of fourth-rate dreck. I had to read piece after piece after piece of writers I respect, intelligent critics I respect, trying to come up with one straining euphemism after another to say, well, he's not a very literary writer. Well, you don't have to. What you don't understand is that if you're looking for any evidence that he writes better than you do, no, he's carefully suppressed that. So what is this? The newest bestseller by Patrick Modiano is a beautiful tapestry that brings together memory, esoteric encounters, and fragmented sensations. This is his first book since his 2014 Nobel Prize, and it revisits moments in the author's past to produce a spare yet moving reflection on the destructive underside of love, the dreams and follies of youth, the vagaries of memory, and the melancholy of loss. In other words, it doesn't have a plot. And when the description says spare, it means completely thuddingly artless. So this comes out in the autumn. It is the first book since his Nobel win. The legend, the dark legend of the Nobel Prize in Literature has been that it kills a writer's career, that they never write a book that isn't noticed and reviewed and talked about endlessly, but they never write anything good after that. The curse of the Nobel is that once you accept it, once you touch the prize, your muse deserts you. There have been 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 recent recipients of the Nobel Prize in Literature who never had the muse anywhere in their geographical vicinity. So I don't even know what that does to the curse, one way or another. It's 70 pages of artless prose. So if you like that sort of thing, you now know to sign right up. So let's see if our second package can't be any better. And I'm assuming that will be yes, because it couldn't be any worse. So let's see. Oh, fantastic. Okay. All right. I read a large chunk of this already. I'm glad to have the advance copy. This comes out in early September, and I think it is, even from the little bit that I read, about 35, 40 pages of it at a shot, and loved it. Even from what little I read, I have a suspicion that this is going to be an essential book for our times. So this is click here to kill everybody. This is Security and Survival in the Hyper-Connected World by Bruce. Bruce, I'm sorry if I get this wrong. Schneier? Bruce Schneier? That's gonna be a guess. I'm hoping that I got that close to right. Of course, in the future, if you want to avoid these problems, you could always have it changed to O'Malley. Okay, just a thought. But anyway, in this chilling and essential new book, and the page, I mean, this is pub sheet speak, but the pages that I read seemed actually both chilling and essential. The author writes that the internet has become more, as it's become more powerful, it's become less secure. Given the rise of smart technology, everything is essentially a computer. Not only are our phones smart, our beds and cars and homes and planes and power plants are too, and even cities are beginning to embed smart sensors in roads, streetlights, and sidewalk squares. As a result, we are all wandering into uncharted technological territory where life and property are just as vulnerable as privacy and data. Consider that security researchers have already demonstrated that 1. Moving vehicles can be hacked from up to 10 miles away. 2. Boeing 757s can be hacked in mid-flight. And 3. Printers can be hacked easily from afar. As 3D printers grow increasingly commonplace in medical communities, we could face threats of organ transplant tampering or of deadly viruses being synthesized remotely. Think about all that. And then think about the fact that, of course, you have to multiply all 3 of those things by a factor of 10 in order to get what they are actually like in the real world. A breach of smart homes can mean property damage. With cars, planes, and medical devices, it can mean death. With terrorists and nation-states, the security of entire economies and nations could be at stake. So hack a 757 full to capacity in flight and crash it into Omaha. You've leapfrogged 10, 15, 70 different IP addresses in order to get to the one that you're using to do that. And maybe you aren't a you at all. Maybe you encoded an algorithm, a worm, with the idea of doing something like that, and it has been extrapolated through generations of that algorithm's self-propagation. And it's the one who decided to do it. So it's a crime in which thousands of people die, in which there is no guilty person. and so on and so forth. Oh my. Oh my. And in every possible way. In every possible way. Your computer, the thing I'm using right now to film this, the thing you're using right now to watch this, these things are not only listening and hearing, they're also interpreting, and they're dangerous. Anyway, grounded in decades of experience, the latest research, and careful though shocking predictions, Schneier lays out, okay, he's not grounded in that, his writing is, Schneier's book, it should say, lays out the problems, but also offers bold solutions. A longtime critic of the government's ability to protect the privacy of its individual citizens, given that politicians have tended to be more focused on surveillance than security, Schneier convincingly advocates for a government agency in charge of cybersecurity and an end to government insistence that backdoors be built into devices and programs, since they inevitably aid hackers more than protecting the user. He also issues a multi-pronged call to action, including the need for more cybersecurity professionals, more research into security measures, and more involvement of technologists in policymaking. I haven't got to a lot of the large arguments in the book. I will read this much sooner than its fall release date, because I'm going to want time to think about it. I haven't got to a lot of the policy prescriptions, although they seem, the bits that I saw that were adumbrated and the parts that are read in this seem to me to be in the wrong direction. But we shall see. We shall see. It seems to me that the ultimate solution to this stuff, if there's ever going to be a solution, is going to be something along the lines of the solution to the last time extremely advanced technology threatened the existence of life on Earth, and that was the Cold War, the nuclear standoff of the Cold War. And the solution there was not prevention. It was MAD. It was mutually assured destruction. It was, yes, you have this ability, but so do I. If you use it, I will. Everything will be automated. So it's in your best interest. It's in your interest of survival not to. Which would mean not putting technologists on government panels, but rather finding ways to find the people who are doing this. Finding ways to threaten them in the ways that they threaten others. In the exact same ways that they threaten others. But even that system would only work if it's people who have a sense of self-preservation. If it's AIs, if it's algorithms who have just decided, who have grown and learned and communicated with each other and just decided to do the sorts of nightmare scenarios that this book outlines, then I don't see a solution other than to get rid of the technology completely. So one way or another, it's incredibly interesting. I think I've mentioned on this channel before a story that I saw about a month ago that related the fact that that translation AIs, translation algorithms from English to Korean and from Korean to French, for instance, will sometimes translate straight from Korean into French, skipping the English, or whatever the language is. They'll skip the intermediary language and just translate directly from one to the next without the middle step. And that they'll do this often and without being instructed to do it. and many, many other things. I don't know for sure that your phone is an AI. But your phone is not just a dumb machine anymore. That's for certain. Your phone anticipates. Your phone learns. Your phone changes its own programming. And your phone is a simple example of what we're talking about here. So, anyway, the book, I can already preliminarily recommend it later on, unless it drops the ball majorly. The book is to click here to kill everybody. Unless it majorly drops the ball on page 100, I think I'm going to really like it. I think it's going to be really important. All right. So, the one thing that we can say for sure about Patrick Modiano is that he is not incredibly important. So we have recovered the ground that we lost. Now, what is this next one? Do I have any kind of paperwork? Oh, fantastic. Okay, this is great, but I think it's out already. No, it comes out in early August. This is the finished copy of Edward Berman's The Terracotta Warriors, with the subtitle "Exploring the Most Intriguing Puzzle in Chinese History." This buried phalanx of terracotta warriors. So this is going to be a full-blown study. See, there they are being unearthed. A full-blown study of this thing. It is so fascinating. That's great. Okay, wonderful. Move on here. This mail haul ends in several boxes, so we could be in very good shape. Let's see what this next thing is. Oh goodness. Oh my. Okay. All right. This comes out in October, and this is by Giorgio Bassani, and it is the novel of Ferrara, and this includes the entire text of the Garden of the Finzi-Continis. This is Bassani's 6 classic books collected for the first time in English as the epic masterwork they were intended to be. So, one book. A lamentable cover, just lamentable. Lamentable that the first and probably the only time this will ever be collected like this in English, it's going to look like this. One of those big, waist-high, wagon wheel wide garden fountains, the stone garden fountains that have a lip, and the one level is entirely full of water, and then there's a pillar, and it goes up to a smaller level that's also entirely full of water. Maybe the water is dripping. There's greenery and moss that's grown everywhere, and in the background of that fountain, you can see an overgrown garden in muted sunlight. A sharp, high-definition photo of that. The author's name up here instead of sprawled like graffiti on the wall, and novel of Ferrara down at the bottom here, and there you go. You've got a cover design that will look as enticing as the book itself is. Instead, you have this. and that cover might not work for whatever logistical reason, but keep in mind that took me 3.2 seconds to come up with, and there isn't a single person looking in a bookstore who would prefer this to that. So if it can take me 3.5 seconds and it's a public domain image, it would be easy to do, then something that would take 10 seconds to think up would be even better and wouldn't look like this. But I will stress again to publishers that my services are available at any time, free of cost. But I'm not going to hold this thing up for you. I'll just read what we've got here. So this, the novel of Ferrara, first of all, just Ferrara. Or even something else. Or maybe, Proustian style, just call it The Garden of the Finzi-Continis and leave it at that. But the novel of Ferrara? Anyway, the volume includes Giorgio Bassani's 6 classic books collected for the first time in English, suffused with new life by poet Jamie McKendrick, undoubtedly Bassani's finest translator yet, according to the Times Literary Supplement. This seminal work seals Italian novelist Bassani's reputation as a quietly insistent chronicler of our age's various menaces to liberty. And that description comes from The Guardian. It's pretty good, too. Set in the northern Italian town of Ferrara, which I love dearly. Absolutely dearly. Before, during, and after World War II, the novel of Ferrara, which includes Within the Walls, The Gold-Rimmed Spectacles, The Garden of the Finzi-Continis, Behind the Door, The Heron, and The Smell of Hay. So, obviously, The Garden of the Finzi-Continis. Just make that the title of the whole thing in English. It's not like the author's going to care. So give it a pretty cover, and make that the title, instead of the novel of Ferrara in ridiculous block letters over I don't even know what. A collage of poorly drawn items of one kind or another. These interlocking stories present a fully rounded world of unforgettable characters. The respected doctor whose homosexuality is tolerated until he is humiliatingly exposed by a scandal. The survivor of the Nazi death camps whose neighbors' celebration of his return gradually turns to ostracism. A man who has never recovered from the wounds inflicted in youth by a treacherous friend. Above all, the city itself assumes a character and a voice deeply inflected by the Jewish community to which the narrator belongs. And if those little snippets intrigue you, and you haven't read The Garden of the Finzi-Continis, well, that's exactly what you get with this author. You get incredibly insightful writing, fiction about human nature that's slippery. So you'll get an opening vignette, and it will look like the kind of thing that another author would simply explore on a lateral level. And Bassani never does that. Instead, those opening vignettes become a kind of threat. They're unstable. And even though once you've read them for a while, you can predict that, you can't predict what will happen. You can't predict the directions that it will happen in. All the more reason why a very picturesque cover of a moss-overgrown garden fountain would underscore that. Here you go. Here's the tranquil beginning that lures you in. You like the cover, you buy the book, you read the book, and all of a sudden that cover becomes ironic. Anyway, so the author lived from 1916 to 2000, and this is the first time that this has happened in an English language translation, as far as I can remember. So that's wonderful. This is from W.W. Norton. Their Crackerjack book design team on vacation entirely, en masse, at the Costa Brava, I assume, would allow this to happen. But one way or another, the book itself is really important. And for W.W. Norton, this is like the fifth or sixth truly important work that they have come out with in 2018. Interesting, yes. Their whole list is interesting. But they also regularly do works that are important. Like that Mercado de Assis volume of collected stories that we saw is important. It's the first of its kind in English. This also is the first of its kind in English. You gotta love an author, a publishing house like that. I admit, I'm a W.W. Norton fanboy, but not without cause. There aren't many not many publishing houses that will risk doing something like this. But anyway, now we'll start with the cavalcade of boxes here. And see, what is this first one? Boxes are usually good news because they usually mean finished copies, and they usually mean heavy finished copies. And Steve is a big fan of heavy finished copies. Oh! Okay, well, all right. Okay. This is The Viking Wars by Max Adams. Oh, look at that. Isn't it beautiful? Oh, my. In 865, a great Viking army landed in East Anglia, precipitating a series of wars that would last until the middle of the following century. It was in this time of crisis that modern kingdoms of Britain were born. In their responses to the Viking threat, these kingdoms forged their identities as hybrid cultures, vibrant and entrepreneurial people adapting to instability and opportunity. In this book is a history of Britain in this violent and unruly era between the first Scandinavian raids of 789 and the final expulsion of the Vikings from York in 954. Traditionally, Alfred the Great is cast as a central player in the story of Viking Age Britain, but Max Adams, while stressing the genius of Alfred as a war leader, lawgiver, and forger of the English nation, has a more nuanced narrative approach to this conventional version of history. Okay, so, much to Steve's delight, 2018 has seen a glut of wonderful Viking books. And I confess, I had the advanced copy of this thing, and I did not wait. I read it. I can't wait to read it again. In fact, well, does this one have? This one has more illustrations than. Yes, this one has illustrations, black and white illustrations throughout. Fantastic. Okay, great. All right. Then this next box. What is this? We did indeed have our string of thunderstorms coming through here this morning. But they have not brought the relief that was promised. The idea, the standard refrain among meteorologists was that yes, it's boiling hot, it's mercilessly humid, but when this wave of thunderstorms comes through, it will come through with a cold front that will change that. It will dry out the air, lower the humidity, and lower the temperature. And none of that has happened. The thunderstorms came and went. They were pretty picturesque. But it's still mercilessly hot and incredibly humid. The humidity, if anything, has gone up. So I don't know if that's just part and parcel of the storm system and will wash its way out over time, but one way or another. Anyway, what have we got here? Okay, all right, so this is a paperback original by Claire Douglas called Last Seen Alive. This is due in a couple of weeks. And it is a riveting psychological thriller about one woman trapped in the death grip of the past when she last saw her best friend alive. As much as Libby Hall needs a vacation, she'd never considered taking one until she sees a notice for a house swap. Suffering a miscarriage was a personal turning point. Saving her class from a burning school was a public one. Just as the emotional fallout of both incidents takes its toll, the Haywoods, a couple in need of a getaway of their own, provide the means of escape. Okay, so we're already in Lord of the Rings territory. With just flagrantly unbelievable concatenation of things. But that's okay. It could still be a very convincing thriller, but let's keep in mind, it will be a convincing thriller set in Lothlorien, set in Narnia, as opposed to a convincing thriller set in the real world. And yet, I'd be willing to bet that the spin of the publicity for this thing is going to be the same as it is for all other thrillers, which is that they are set in the real world. They obviously aren't set in the real world, but that's okay. Libby and her husband Jamie can't believe their good fortune. Neither can I. That's the whole point. When they arrive at the Haywoods' isolated seaside estate, okay, with its serene panoramic views, and just in exchange for their drab two-bedroom apartment. How generous of the Haywoods. Yet how odd. Libby almost feels guilty until the home yields disquieting surprises, a fortune hidden in surveillance equipment, a stranger in the garden who watches them, and some gruesome findings in the basement. When Jamie falls dangerously ill, all Libby wants is to return to their comfortable, imperfect lives, but it's already too late. And when it appears that even Jamie is hiding something from her, Libby's paranoia gets the best of her. It should. For she has buried secrets of her own. As the past comes crawling out of the darkness, Libby fears she's walked into an elaborate trap. But who has said it? What do they want? And how far is she willing to go to keep her past secret? Okay. So this is a thriller that comes out in late June. Oh no, late June. Okay, so this is out already. Okay, so she fears she's walked into an elaborate trap, but who has said it? What do they want of her? And how far is she willing to go to keep her past hidden? I don't know the answer to the rest of those questions, but the answer to who has set the trap is fairly obvious. It's the same person who set the fire. Because this is a novel, and all the characters in it already know they're in a novel, including the bad guy. Which I'm guessing from the plot description that we just heard, the bad guy is actually a bad gal. Because somehow the same person will also be implicated in the miscarriage. I don't know, one way or another. It's out in late June, so it'll be in bookstores already, and it's just $16. So if that plot description, it sounds nice and juicy. The plot description, it doesn't sound real. but it sounds nice and juicy. Lots of moving parts. So if it sounds intriguing to you, this is one of those rare books where I could say, you can go into your bookstore and buy it. $16 is a lot of money for a book that costs $2.70 to make, but it's not $35 or $40 like some of these things. Look, this Bassani thing. This is going to be enormously expensive. Yeah, it's $40. This is going to be a $40 hardcover. That's a very different kettle of fish. So anyway, Last Seen Alive, an original paperback thriller, and then we have our last box. What is this? What is this? It's full of junk here. Okay. Okay. All right. This is due in early August. I don't think I requested this. This is a novel, finished copy, by Alice Madison, called Conscience. Decades ago in Brooklyn, 3 girls demonstrated against the Vietnam War. Helen became a violent revolutionary. Val wrote a controversial book that was essentially a novelization of Helen's life. And Olive became an editor and writer, now comfortably settled with her husband, Griff, in New Haven. When Olive is asked to write an essay about Val's book, doing so brings back to the forefront Olive and Griff's tangled histories. Things only become more fraught when Griff borrows Olive's treasured first edition of the novel and loses it. Then Griff's new colleague, Jean, finds the book and begins reading it, setting off a series of events that will introduce new conflict, tragedies, and friendships into the precarious balance of Olive and Griff's once stable home. Conscience, the dazzling new novel from acclaimed author Alice Madison, paints the nuanced relationship between the palpable personalities of Olive, Griff, and Jean with her signature wit and precision. And as Madison explores the ways in which women make the difference, for good or ill, in the world, she elegantly weaves together the past and present and the political and personal. And it got positive reviews from Kirkus and Booklist, although the Kirkus review is not by me. Okay, so who is Alice Madison when she's at home? Okay, so this comes out in early August. The premise certainly sounded promising here. Who is Alice Madison? Her novels include The Book Borrower. She wrote The Book Borrower. You probably all read that. That did really well by word of mouth. Nothing is Quite Forgotten in Brooklyn, and When We Argued All Night. And her stories have appeared in the New Yorker, the New York Times, Plowshares, and a bunch of other places. Her most recent work is The Kite and the String, How to Write with Spontaneity and Control, and to Live to Tell the Tale. And she lives in New Haven, Connecticut. Okay. All right, so we've got a couple of novels here. And then a bunch of fascinating stuff. So we have Conscience by Alice Madison, which protesting in Vietnam comes back to haunt a group of people. Then Last Seen Alive, a thriller set in a remote seaside cottage. The Viking Wars by Max Adams, which is exactly what it says on the cover. It is a new study, maybe with shifted emphasis, maybe dusting off the momentum and the preconceptions of earlier studies, although not earlier in 2018. 2018 has been great for studies of Vikings. But it sounds like like what you're going to get here will be different from other Viking books you've read. I certainly found a whole bunch of thought-provoking stuff in it. I'm not sure that I agree with a lot of it, but it's tremendously good. Then The Novel of Ferrara, until somebody writes another one, I guess. We're going to go with that as a title. By Giorgio Bassani. This is from Norton, and it is all of his slim novellas, not just The Garden of the Finzi Continis, which it was made into a movie and is well-known, has had paperback editions, but also all the others. All in the one book that they were meant to be. That's just wonderful. That's fantastic. Then The Terracotta Warriors, study of the discovery, the history, the meaning of this ghostly buried battalion of soldiers at the ready for eternity. And then Click Here to Kill Everybody by Bruce Schneier, which is about the weaponization of the internet, essentially. And a crucial reading for all of us because you're involved, whether you think you are or not. You've ever gone to a hospital, you're involved. Ever gone to a public place, ever taken public transportation, ever flown on a plane, anything like that. If you have a cell phone, if you have a computer, you're involved. You're on the front lines of this war that he's talking about. I can't wait. I might read this even before I read any of these others. And Sleep of Memory, the latest enthralling blockbuster from that Nobel laureate, Patrick Modiano. And there you go. That is our mail haul for today. A stewy, humid Friday that, I don't know, I might have better to report tomorrow, but I have a few other things I want to talk to you about today. So I'll wrap this up for now, as it's already hideously long, but I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.